Hello, OG, and welcome to Speaking of Arabic. Well, he's not a stranger. Been here before. The first time was a long time ago, but he's now back for the third time as Chief Executive Officer of Port St. Martin, Mr. Alexander Gumbs. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Oral. It's a pleasure being here, Mr. Gibbs. Once again, back on your program and looking forward to a great discussion in terms of how things are going with the port.
Do you remember the first time you been on this show?
The first time I was on your show, I believe it was right coming out of being an intern at the port. So it had to be at least 10 years ago.
Yeah. Time fly fast, huh?
Time fly fast, but here we are doing more, doing better, and contributing back to this beautiful country.
But it's good, you started there. People see the potential that you had, and your whole professional attitude, I think, helps that a lot.
Definitely, Oral, and it goes with hard work and and opportunities as well, and what you do with the opportunities. I've had a great opportunity to come to the port as an intern where I met you, and over the years, grow within the different ranks within the company, and ultimately was able to apply to be the CEO, and here I am today. Fortunate and happy, and look forward to continue giving back to Country St. Martin and building the product as we look at business from a port standpoint.
And it's a huge operation. People don't realize how big it is. They see the cruise ships, but they don't realize, and I spoke with you about that before, there's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah, there is a lot of things, Oral, and I think one of the items that we look at internally is how more do we share information in terms of having persons understand truly the magnitude of the port's operations. And that also ties into looking ahead and getting more youth, in particular coming out of school, interested in following degrees and or practical experience more from the maritime standpoint, and also wanting the interest to come and work at and with the port.
So you're getting interesting young people applying so forth or coming?
Yes, we are seeing that moving, but I think it can be a lot more. If you look at vacancies for pilotage, meaning persons has to go to school for 4 to 8 years to become a pilot. Yeah, 4 years theory, 4 years practical, and then they roll in. So if you look at a cycle and getting a kid out of high school becoming a pilot, it's minimum 8 to 10 years before they return back as a full-fledged pilot. And we're seeing the gap there in terms of professionals coming back in those fields, but also you have certified crane operators that they also have to go through training for 2-3 years before they can operate. You will look at maritime engineers, looking at it from a hydraulic standpoint. We manage and operate the 2 bridges here as well in the Simpson Bay area. So it's quite wide in terms of the spectrum of the operations. And again, we look forward to, in the coming time, working with the various career fairs and the Department of Education as well, and looking and seeing how best do we entice the youth to follow career paths within the maritime industry.
I think the younger they are, the better it is for the organization because they work longer.
Yeah, correct. Thinking about succession planning, that is quite important. We've seen other Caribbean destinations, such as the Bahamas, where I lived, has catered programs working with 1 or 2 of the cruise brands, which we've had discussions with them as well, in terms of when will we see a St. Martin captain a cruise ship, for example. So we've seen Bahamians running through the ranks, soon to be captain, 1 or 2 persons I've heard of. We have, in the world, there's 1 or 2 female captains as well, which is quite new to the industry. But what about St. Martin? And I hope before my time ends, of course, not as a CEO, but just time in general in our beautiful country, that we would groom 1 or 2 captains that will captain cruise ships. We do have skilled professionals from St. Martin that I'm aware of that are second in line or first in line in the yachting industry, which is gross tonnage is a bit different. There are skilled workforce from St. Martin also in the cargo industry. But as of now, I'm unaware of any St. Martin cruise captain, and that would be beautiful to see.
But you've done amazingly well because you also worked for Carnival, I think, at one time, right?
Yes, correct. I worked for Carnival for a bit more than a year, Carnival Corp. I was based in actually the Bahamas in Freeport, and I was actually the director of the cruise port in Turks and Caicos, the city, Grand Turk. And I also oversaw the beginning of the operations when Carnival initially launched their new port that opened earlier this year, Celebration Key. So I was also part of that initial team that looked at Celebration Key.
As I said, Martin, you've done a lot in a very short time. You're not 50 yet, right?
Well, Oral, I think I have 2 young kids. My son is making 2 years old in October, and my daughter is also making 4 in October. So, no, I'm not 50 years old. I started a bit later with kids. I'm still under 40. Mm-hmm. But there's still much more to be done. I see this still as the beginning part of my career. And I think there's a lot more to come in that regard, Oral.
I'm going to come over to it, but I have to ask you one more question. And I never asked you this one before. As a little boy, you wanted to do this, or there was something else?
So I think I realized around 14 or 15 years old that I wanted to do something with boats. I was always fascinated with the sea and with boats. And growing up, I did not have much opportunities to actually go on the sea. But I was always fascinated with boats. And I always tell this story when I met my wife. I was 17 and she was like 15. We were both in high school. And at the time, I was busy with my closing report in high school. And the topic was actually relating to cruise. And, at that point in time, we were making jokes that we were going to look at the cruise ships, et cetera, et cetera. So from that age, I think I knew one way or the other I wanted to be in this industry, not knowing if it was cruise or cargo. Full circle, here I am in that regard.
Well, in case you've just joined us or you're watching or you're listening to Speaking About FM, I'm Earl Gibbs here with the Chief Executive Officer of Port St. Martin, Mr. Alexander Gumbs. He's my guest and we're here speaking with him. So, just a few weeks ago, Star of the Seas came in. Mm-hmm. And I was invited, but I couldn't make it. But I took a short little video, like 10 seconds from my porch, and posted it on my Facebook page. To my surprise, over 50,000 views. I'm surprised how many people all over the world are so into that.
Yeah, definitely, Oral. I saw actually when you posted that on the morning of September 11th. I think I was the second person that liked the video at the time. And, with these new debuts of the new ships and the technology that's driven around it, it's created such a mass following, not only of enthusiasts of cruise ships, but just in general, people looking at what it brings to destinations. And St. Martin was fortunate enough to be one of the few destinations on the inaugural sailing of the Star of the Seas. We were also for Icon of the Seas, the sister ship. But the technology of these vessels and just the mass marketing that is pushed from the US-based headquarters through, in particular, social media has created such a buzz. And if you think about that 50,000 views that you've gathered for that one ship, it was not necessarily about a ship, but it was about the ship in St. Martin. And that goes a long way in terms of how we can leverage social media to share our message, but also our product being St. Martin. Just yesterday, I saw a platform released, and we were trying to hold this until next month to release it, but they released it already, that Margaritaville at Sea, which is also the cruise brand ran by the Jimmy Buffett company, Margaritaville, will also have St. Martin on its inaugural cruise in season 26-27. And this has been a discussion we've been having with that particular brand for the last 14 months before the FCCA conference that was held in St. Martin last year. And I was pleased on Friday last week to receive an email from one of the executives saying, hey, Alex, we appreciate all the time that you've put into the dialogue with us. You've said that you want St. Martin to be on the inaugural itinerary, and lo and behold, we listened. St. Martin is on an inaugural itinerary. So, this business goes a long way in terms of the relationships. And if we look at the upcoming high season, it's actually fantastic. If we look at the results of forecasting for 2025, we're actually expecting about 200, a bit more than 200,000 passengers more than 2024. If we look at inaugural cruises, so ships that's coming to St. Martin for the first time this season, we have 23 new ships.
That's a lot.
I don't recall ever seeing that. From the 23 ships, or I must say some are older ships, so some are ships that are already 10 years old, but never cruised in this region or never came to St. Martin. But from the 23, there are a few that's brand new, like Brilliance from Virgin Voyages, which is coming, is coming next month. They have 2 ships coming this season.
Good.
Last season was the first time we brought them here. They came with 1 ship. This season they're coming with 2 ships. We have Four Seasons, which is known as a high-end hotel chain. They've also entered into the cruise market, which they consider as a yacht. So it's similar to Ritz-Carlton. Four Seasons also has St. Martin in its inaugural season here this season. So, from that standpoint, there's a lot happening in the cruise industry. If you look at it from a home porting standpoint as well, St. Martin is becoming more interesting for, let's say, tri-state and European passengers to start their cruise here. We know that there's challenges in some of the key home ports with persons not necessarily wanting to fly through the U.S. To start their cruise. So it all of a sudden opens new opportunities for us here. And I've had a great discussion with the new CEO of the St. Martin Airport. And I've also brought this to his attention. Like, let's start planning and looking at capacity, looking ahead. Because while this season we might have 78, I believe, calls to home port, which will carry about 20,000 passengers, that can grow double-fold in the next few years. But we have to be prepared for that. We have to be responsible with catering to that business. But home porting, adds significant to the stayover market as well. Statistics show about 25% of passengers that board a ship in a country come to the country a few days prior, so pre-vacation, or post-cruise, they stay a few days longer. So that also adds a significant, dollar, a Caribbean guilder value to the economy, which has not necessarily been pushed over the years. So that's something we're looking at as well. Luxury market, it's not only about the volume, but it's about the caliber and type of clientele, with the limited influence we may have to dictate itineraries. And I'd say dictate, but to determine, rather, how itineraries are planned.
MSC, they're European privately owned company, right? Family owned company. I know they did a lot of sailing out of Martinique and so forth. Did they show any interest in home porting St. Martin?
So actually, MSC have been home porting out of St. Martin for the last few years. But what they do out of St. Martin are partial turns. So about 100 cabins or so they turn in St. Martin.
Okay.
MSC is indeed a private company, the fastest growing cruise brand in the world. They are now the 3rd largest company. Over the span of 10 years, they've become the 3rd largest company. And we've actually also recently made a announcement that they are increasing their calls to St. Martin, but in the summer months. So that is also something that we are very much looking at, Mr. Gibbs, is how do we improve the summer months? Because if you look at, for example, November, December this year, November we have about 95 cruise ships coming in. December we have about 125 cruise ships coming in. But if we look at June, July, August this year, on average we had 15 cruise ships a month, right? So looking at how best we can work along with the brands through summer programs and enticing them to basically boost the summer months. And that's where discussions have been had with Norwegian Cruise Lines in particular. We've had an announcement on this earlier this year, MSC Cruises, and 1 or 2 of the other brands such as Margaritaville as well that's coming.
It's so interesting because when in the morning I look out and I see the ships passing, and to me this summer was good, especially on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've seen a lot of ships come in.
This summer indeed wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It was definitely better than last year. But if we look at before Hurricane Irma, it was a bit better. So rather than 15 calls, we had, right before the pandemic.
Okay.
So rather than 15, 16 calls, we had 20, 21 calls. And that was based on the ships that was weekly coming from San Juan. Since the pandemic, San Juan have had issues with their poor development and infrastructure. And also the industry sold a lot of cruise ships, more than 30 cruise ships during the pandemic.
Most of the older ships,
The
right?
older ships. And those were the ships that actually stayed in the Caribbean in the summer months. So those are the ships that, filled our itinerary in the summer months that we heavily relied on. But thankfully, if you look at the rate of production of new ships is going so fast that now those summer months are now becoming back filled with ships out of San Juan, which is very important for us. And also we've seen a drive of brands bringing their home port to Fort Lauderdale,
Really? Yeah.
which is also a good port of embarkation to get this far, let's say, to the Eastern Caribbean to St. Martin.
So, which one of the cruise ships is the biggest in St. Martin in terms of how many ships come in? Is it Carnival? Is it Norwegian? Is it Royal Caribbean?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, interesting. So the largest customer right now is actually Royal Caribbean. They are almost 60% of the market share. And that is also based on the volume of the ships that they bring to the destination. So if you look at last week, for example, we had a Oasis class ship in port, but you also had Star of the Seas was in port as well. Those two ships alone was 15,000 passengers.
What's the difference between those two, Oasis class and Star of the Seas?
So Oasis class is slightly smaller than the Icon class ships.
Okay.
Oasis class has a capacity of up to 6,000 passengers. The Icon class has a capacity a bit more than 7,000 passengers at a full capacity. And the ship is a bit more heavier. So I believe Star class is about 220,000 gross tons, and Oasis class is around 200,000. But similar platform, a bit Icon class is a bit longer, a bit beamier, a bit wider. Similar concepts on board, but newer technologies.
It's amazing, to see those ships and how huge they are. I was fortunate to be invited on the maiden voyage of the Oasis of the Seas back in 2009.
2009, yeah.
It was quite an experience.
Yeah, it was definitely one for the books where St. Martin had leadership at the time, port leadership, but also, of course, the support of government. Had the outlook and also the relationship and dialogue with the brands in preparing for the future. And, I heard an interview earlier this week, and the person mentioned that because of that is why Star of the Seas and Icon of the Seas could have come to the port. And that's exactly right. Because this business is not looking 2-3 years ahead. We're strategically busy 10, 15 years ahead. Some of the investments which I'll touch base on shortly are also catering in terms of not only growing the business over the next 10 years, but actually sustaining the size of the business as well over the next 10, 15 years. And there's also certain limitations that we have to take responsibly into account as a port is volume. The volume that came through Port St. Martin in 2013 and 14, Oral, I'm talking about 1.9 and 2 million cruise passengers.
Yeah.
It'll be irresponsible of me as a CEO, and I've said this on a previous program as well. It'll be irresponsible of me to say that is my aim and goal right now for Port St. Martin. It is not, because we have a challenge with traffic. And 10, 11 years ago, you had, probably 15 or 20% less cars on the road. Tour operators could have done 2 tours in a day. Now they can only do 1 tour a day. So that's less dollars also moving in the economy, because we are not able to move people landside as efficient as we did it 11 years ago, because there was no new roads built as yet. So strategically, that is also something all interested parties, including our stakeholder/shareholder government, in the roadmap in terms of, how will developments phase from an infrastructure standpoint, and then how do we, as a port, basically level that into growing of the business. And that's why I said, for us right now, if we look at a high season, there's nothing more we can do there because it's quite congested as is, but it's now focusing on the off season. So hopefully we can pick up another 150,000 passengers in the off season. That would bring us back to 1.7, 1.8 million passengers. This year, like I said, we're exiting around 1.6 million, so between 1.55 and 1.6. Fingers crossed that there's no more storms. This year already we had, north of 10 ship cancellations because of inclement weather. So if you think about, 5,000 passenger ship, that's 50 to 60,000 passengers gone. Right. Snap of a finger gone. So we are still looking and hoping that there's no inclement weather for the remainder of the hurricane season, that we exit around 1.5, 1.6 million. But, tapering back on a previous question, Mr. Gibbs, in terms of your 2009 experience in the port being prepared for the industry, that's the juncture exactly where we are right now. St. Martin is one of the few destinations that can actually host the Icon class ships, one of the few, in particular in the Caribbean and also worldwide. But we've seen the demand from the industry in more berthing space for that size ship. So I'll give you an example. Like I said, there's days with 2 Oasis class ships in port. We only have 2 berths. Now, if Royal Caribbean or Carnival or MSC, who has that larger class ships, above 180,000 gross tons, if they were to request a berth for 20 weeks in 2026 for a 6,000 passenger ship, and there's one day that there's already 2 ships in port, we would have to tell them no. But if you think about it, the industry plans their itineraries 2 years in advance. So if you can't guarantee those 20 berths to them, because one day or 2 days you have a conflict, they're not coming. Oh. So you lose 20 times 6,000 passengers. That's 120,000 passengers at a snap of a finger because you did not have the berthing capacity. So strategically, we are almost forced to invest in the coming, within 5 years for sure, in expanding our newer cruise pier that was built in 2000.
Hold that thought, Ms. Gumbs. I want to come back to you on that, but I have to go to a quick break, all right? We'll be right back. We're speaking here with Mr. Gumbs. Mr. Gumbs is the Chief Executive Officer of Port St. Martin. He's my guest on the show, and it's always a pleasure having him. He's a young St. Martiner. We're very proud of him. We're going to be right back. Please stay with us right here on Speaking of Everything.
We are vibrant, expressive, warm, and diverse. Together, we conquer, and now we expand into new horizons, giving you more of the best. Introducing our new Banco Matico Plus with wider acceptance, purchase protection, and enhanced security. Whether you're online, traveling, or in paradise, experience more with Windward Island Bank. Banco Matico Plus. More of the best.
My guest here on Speaking of Everything is Mr. Alexander Gumbs. He's Chief Executive Officer of Port St. Martin, and it's always a pleasure having him on the program. And Speaking of Everything on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio. Now, you're speaking about the investments and the 3-year planning by the ships, too. And if you don't have that, what happens? So you have to make more investments to accommodate these large ships?
Correct. So looking ahead, while the ships are getting larger, it also becomes diligent for us to be able to accommodate the ships, right? So right now in the high season, we have days where there's 5-6 ships in port. Looking ahead, 5 to 10 years ahead, you might only have 4 ships in port. But the 4 ships would be carrying the same capacity of 6 ships. Right. But if you don't have the berthing facility to accommodate those 4 ships in that regard, then you will lose business. So we'll basically cycle ourselves out of the industry because we don't have enough berthing facilities or parking spaces, as you may call it. But we also have to take into account that the first cruise pier was built in the early 2000s, so between 1999 and 2000. So it's already 25 years. They've already gone through significant challenges because of, natural disasters, the weather. And right now we are busy basically restrengthening that pier and adding more to it to extend the life cycle. But it also comes a time where that pier will have to be rebuilt, looking 15, 20 years ahead. For that to occur, we also have to have an alternative for ships to berth during that period. So what we are saying as Port and to our key stakeholders is that with the expansion of the newer cruise dock at the port, it's no way, and reiterating on what I said earlier, it's no way looking at having 7, 8 cruise ships in port, because that would be a disaster and it would work against us from an experiential standpoint of the guests. No one wants to sit in 2-3 hours of traffic. Our reviews as a destination will tank, but it's to be able to strategically tap in to days when there's requests for multiple, let's say, Icon class ships. So that is pivotal for us if we want to strategically, thrive in this industry. And this is a beautiful industry. I've actually seen some reports recently speaking about passenger expenditure. I think that is very important to touch base on. And it's also very important for our listening audience to know, based on the study that was completed in October 2024, St. Martin is actually ranked as the #1 port in crew expenditure. So the amount that crew members spend, an average of $117 a person. And this is public information. This can be found via the FCCA's website, the Brea report. And if you look at passengers in the Caribbean, we're actually #2 at $166 a person.
After what other?
USVI is there at $167. There's also Panama in a report that is technically #1, but that's because of home porting, and I don't consider them part of this part of the Caribbean. So, St. Martin is #2 from a passenger standpoint at $166 a person on average. That is significant. And if you look at the contributions as well, besides that, a significant amount of passengers take tours, go to the beach in downtown on the boardwalk, go to the friend side and enjoy the cuisine and, basically immerse themselves into the country. And sometimes, we get feedback and say, yeah, but, Front Street is empty and the stores this and that. But, I think there's also a very hard question to ask, and what has been done to invest in a product mix in Front Street to lure passengers in. Because unfortunately, and this is something that has to be understood, unfortunately, or fortunately, St. Martin has been blessed to have a lot of repeat guests, right? More than 3.5 times on average, the guests have been here. And they know, Front Street is sort of labeled as the shopping for jewelry and watches in the Caribbean. But if you, Oral, don't want to buy a watch or a jewelry or diamonds, you may choose not to go into Front Street because your perception, it's only that. So I think there's some work to be done with all of the stakeholders and how we truly position the Great Bay shopping area, and basically spread that message to the passengers, and that still needs some attention.
When you look at other islands like Antigua, Martinique, Guadeloupe, they have more than one port where the ships can come in and dock. St. Martin only have, St. Martin, one port with 2 huge docks. In the past, I've spoken to people in the same industry before you that they had some plans for expansion, but not at the current location. Expansion to other locations on the Dutch side. Is that still in the works, or that is off the table?
That is very much a relevant item long-term, Oral. I think it is imperative to further explore that route as we see, congestion getting in and out of Point Blanche. I know there was also discussions in looking at the cargo movement, which is very important to Port St. Martin Group as well. And I want to share some information on the cargo side as well. But yeah, so that's more looking long term. That's $200-300 million investment. Right now, we are getting financially stable as a company coming out of the losses from Irma and the losses from the pandemic. We had over $30 million in losses. We've had a very strong financial results over the last 3 years. I think we actually hit record numbers. And we believe in every dollar earned as a company is a dollar that we can reinvest, not having to go to financial institutions paying interest on top of that. So if you have $1, why pay $1.05, $1.06 if you can spend that dollar back out into investments? And that's exactly what we're busy with. Also from a cargo standpoint, which is also a very important linking pin to our cruise industry because we provision cruise ships as well. But there's also significant investments going into the cargo product. I believe sometime next year, later this year, we'll be making an official announcement of purchasing yet a new crane.
Really? Yeah, that's good.
So another new crane, swapping out. Right? We have 3 cranes right now. But one of the older cranes are almost 20 years, so we'll be swapping that out to a new crane. Official announcements will be followed, so I guess, or you have the hot scoop here in that regard. But that's already a $6 million investment. And then if you look at transshipment in the cargo business has been growing double digits.
Really?
Yeah, double digits numbers. I just saw the report through August. We're up 24% versus 2024.
That's a little higher than what I heard a few years ago from MSCG, something like that.
Yes, CMSCG. Yes, yeah. Correct.
They were predicting like 20%.
So we are in very much double-digit numbers. We've had a new line actually came servicing through Europe as well, Geese lines. And of course, you have CMACGM, which is a huge staple moving containers. We have tropical shipping out of West Palm Beach. We have King Ocean that comes out of Miami. So we do have that direct trade routes. And St. Martin, because of our productivity, our efficiency, is seen as a very important hub for the neighboring islands. So significant investments are going further into the cargo product as we look at tapping even further into the transshipment business in particular. What was a bit, I won't say alarming, but was a flag for me when I looked at the August statistics, full imports were actually down by 4%.
Really?
So that one way or the other can have a correlation to how things are going on the island. But if you look at, I must say as well, if you look at the numbers over the last 5 years, they were highly inflated because of the build back, right? Okay. So because of the build back, the full import numbers was through the roof because of the importing of furniture and construction material, etc. So we are seeing now that the build back is actually slowing down a bit, which we also predicted, right? So if we look at the numbers, full import comparing to 2019, it's a little higher than 2019. So we're seeing the full import in terms of build back going down, but there's also large projects currently undergoing on the island and projects that I've heard that will be launched that we think will boost back the capacities in the full import of containers to the island. Yeah.
In case you just joined us, I'm OG. My guest is Mr. Alexander Gumbs. He is Chief Executive Officer of Port St. Martin. You're watching or you're listening to Speaking of Everything on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio station. When you look at St. Martin, it is still popular. Of course, we have issues with traffic and so forth. And we see all these huge ships that are coming in that you mentioned. And the industry is growing. There's those Oasis class, not Oasis class, the other one, the Icon class, are these huge ships. Mm-hmm. But what about the mega yacht business? Because I know at one time there was this huge yacht by this Russian billionaire in St. Martin all the time. But after the issues with Ukraine and so forth, they're no longer here.
Yeah. I actually had a brief, I would say, touch point with one of the owners of the marina in Point Blanche. And that was, for a brief second, also the discussion, right? Saying, hey, you know, we can't wait for the high season to come back to see the yachts flowing back in. But to our surprise, over the last 2-3 years, there've been a sort of replacement vessels that, even though that specific clientele group that was sanctioned were not able to come to St. Martin, slips were still full. Business was still booming. So it shows, you know, to an extent how large the yachting business is. But also, I think if you look at the economic report that was co-financed by the port and the marine trade and government, that the yachting industry actually adds a significant contribution to the economy. I believe that report spoke of 16% of the GDP actually comes from the yachting industry. And from what we have seen as a port, while initially we were forecasting worse, to our surprise, and from a very positive standpoint, it was not it did not have a detrimental effect that we initially was forecasting with the let's say sanctions that was placed on that clientele group. But if you look at here in the Simpson Bay area, you look at the lagoon last season, there was a lot of charter yachts in. And the marina is also actively pursuing new business as well by attending and participating in the various yacht conferences, such as the Monaco Boat Show, which is coming up in a few weeks, the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. And you know, that also yield new relationships and also putting St. Martin on a map for new clientele. If you look at the causeway here as well, as you know, we've had beautiful lights on the causeway in the past. They were damaged during the passing of Irma. And due to the fluidity of business between 2018 and let's say 2022, we were unable to, look back and invest a significant amount in replacing those lights. Okay. As I said, over the last 3 years, we were able to position the port stronger from a financial standpoint. And just a few weeks ago, we actually got approval to reinvest back into the lights on the causeway. So the orders are basically being finalized, and we are hoping to have the causeway back fully lit before the end of the year. So before the Christmas, let's say Christmas. But of course, it goes with shipping from China and so, you know, we are looking at that, but we are hoping to have it up and running at least partially before Christmas this year. So
Slack is still in charge of the marina industry, right?
So Slack is not in charge of the marine industry. So there's been sort of a misconception for a very long time. Slack.
Maybe I used the wrong word there, but
yeah, it's an advisory body. So Slack has an advisory role. Slack has a management agreement with government, and of those responsibilities is basically the opening of the Simpson Bay Bridge, the maintenance, and the guarding of that bridge. There's other advisory responsibilities in that agreement where you look at the state of the lagoon and business around the lagoon, etc. But we are also having discussions with government in terms of that current agreement and what we're going to do looking ahead. So those discussions have started in terms of the port's role and government's role, and looking and seeing how best together with the marine industry that we collectively basically further showcase St. Martin as a premium destination.
I know there were some issues with the marine industry and Slack in terms of Slack's authority and what they can do. So that's no longer an issue.
There's always discussions in terms of where the lines are drawn. But for us, we are much more focused in looking ahead. We're very focused in building the industry and facilitating with building and supporting the industry. As a port, we have a member on membership on the SMMTA board. So we do have a member who is our liaison with SMMTA board. I have a very good relationship with the past president and the current president of SMMTA. We WhatsApp when there's questions and discussions. But no, I think it's cordial, and together we're looking at how do we further position St. Martin not only as a premier hub to start charters, but as a premium destination for yachts to come to St. Martin.
We're seeing more and more marinas being built. I understand there's a proposal for another one. We're gonna saturate the market. Can we take all of that business when it comes to the yachting industry?
Well, the capacity of the yachting business to an extent goes hand in hand with the capacity of the airport and private jets, right?
Okay.
So at a given point in time, when the airport reaches capacity, that also determines the capacity from a yachting standpoint to an extent. I know the airport are also busy with their master planning, looking at their, their taxiway and more parking for jets, etc. I look forward to that happening. But yes, St. Martin still plays and still has potential for growth from the yachting standpoint. Oral, if you look at some of the yacht services that's being offered here in terms of upholstery and engineering and fabrication, without calling
it's the best in the region.
Without calling the particular companies, they are the best in the region. I personally have associates out of St. Lucia that run tours, and they send their catamarans to St. Martin, and also persons that I know USVI actually send their boats to St. Martin for servicing and fabrication, etc. So aside from the tourism aspect of yachting guests and charters, you look at it from a service standpoint, it's also very, very important in the Northeastern Caribbean. Very important.
So what are you hearing when you compare the Simpson Bay Lagoon to Great Bay Harbor when it comes to the yachting industry? Is Simpson Bay still better now?
Well, I think with the developments that's taking place in Point Blanche, Great Bay, in particular the construction of the Doc Martin Marina. If you look at the Chesterfields area, there's a new F&B facilities there, grumpies for crew members, etc. So we're seeing some of that business coming to town, but some of these yachts that actually go to these marinas don't necessarily want to come into in Simpson Bay. But Simpson Bay is still a melting pot. It's still a hub. Simpson Bay is the home of the entertainment currently on island, which is very important for crew members. If you look at Simpson Bay, most of the provisioning supermarkets are also in their vicinity. It's in their vicinity to the airport. So is Point Blanche taken away from the Simpson Bay era? I don't think so. I think it's actually complementing the product and the options that you have on St. Martin.
Well, I wouldn't say it's taken away because I think Doc Martin is a beautiful marina. The thing is, one person told me, said, Orlo, I could come to Simpson Bay, I can step off the yacht, I could walk to a casino, all these different restaurants. I can't do that in Great Bay.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But that also opens opportunities. If you look at Great Bay as a whole, after 7 p.m., there's not much happening. There's one or two restaurants that are open, but it's not necessarily open for night activities. If we look at the cruise business, there have been requests in the past as well for ships staying later and wanting to immerse themselves into Great Bay, but there's still some work there to be done. It can happen, but it goes also with a joint collaborative effort with the Ministry of Justice, so additional police patrolling, Ministry of Rummy looking at the lighting situation throughout. So there's a few safety points that needs to be addressed in that regard, that we can truly put a package together and say, hey, vessels stay until 12 p.m. at night. Legislation will be in place through the Ministry of Thea that they can open their casino on board for those passengers that don't want to come off of the ship, that they can open the specialty restaurants while they're in port if they stay until 11 p.m., that those passengers that don't want to come off the ship And at night, if there's 15 or 20% of 6,000 people that wants to come off of the ship, that's 1,200 people that you won't see. And, they can go on a night tour to a restaurant. They can walk to Phillipsburg. They can have, nighttime entertainment. And so there's options, there's opportunities. But I think still there's some work to be done before we can truly, like I say, package that and really sell it as a viable option.
Mr. Gumbs, we're a very lucky island. I'll tell you why. I've been to St. Thomas and on that cruise back in 2009 and Oasis of the Seas. I've been to St. Thomas many times before that. And you can see in St. Thomas a large police presence. You don't see it in St. Martin. Sometimes I drive by there and I ask myself, where are the police?
Mm-hmm.
At least one patrol or two officers there. No one. Other days you see one. We cannot continue like this. I'm not blaming you for this. I think this is something that the government, the authorities, the Ministry of Justice need to take more consideration in, because this island, we have a lot of people here. But you cannot have a cruise ship in port, 6,000, 7,000 people, and not one police officer in the area. I don't think that's good. And I've seen it many times.
Yeah. I
I
think indeed, Oral, there's room for improvement there. But it also goes with our campaigns to the youth to inspire them and instill in them to actually come to service to the country. It comes with cutting the image of police officers in that regard from the youth and making it an attractive, not a job, a career.
Police officer. They don't want
And that is a challenge. We see the same thing in other sectors as well, such as security. How many locals, many times you say, yeah, but, when we come to the port, is this nationality there without calling any particular nationality in that one, etc. Where's the locals? But if the locals are not putting themselves forward for these type of jobs, then we have what we have in the market as is. So, it goes from that perspective as well. But I also have to share it from the passenger's perspective too. When you go to ports and you see too much police, that's also a concern, because then you ask yourself the hard questions. Hey, is it really safe here that I'm seeing so much police? So there's a fair balance there. But I think from what I've been hearing, it's being addressed. And curtailing back to what you initially said, we are a blessed country and we should give thanks every day. And I think we should also take this opportunity. I should take this opportunity to also thank the stakeholders, the taxi drivers, the shopkeepers, the restaurants, bars, tour operators. Thank them for their contributions to the industry, because really we are top ranked when you look at Caribbean cruise destinations. St. Martin is still very frequently referenced at cruise conferences as a destination that does it well. And it does not mean that there's not areas for improvement. They are, definitely they are. But we still have to thank our stakeholders in that regard, for being courteous, for being still friendly, and for being understanding to, at times, difficult guests.
I understand. Mr. Gunn, I sensed and I saw your little uncomfort when I spoke about the police. But you see, the reason why I brought that up, what happens outside of the port is not your responsibility per se, right? But I saw a fight between some gypsy guys there at the front of the port. It was very disturbing. It's not your fault, but that's why I said there need to be police on that area. We can no longer continue like this. This is a huge investment. You're doing a superb job. On this island, unfortunately, people get upset when you talk about the truth. The facts are, we cannot continue like this with the port of St. Martin being the entrance for thousands, millions of cruise passengers, and they're at risk because we don't feel police officers are necessary there. Let me tell you, with that investment you're making at the port and all that money is coming in, we should have 5 police officers there, period. because they're paying for it indirectly. So that's the reason why I brought it up. Not to make you feel uncomfortable, but to speak truth to fact, as they would say. And it's a fact. We need to take care of that. And I really hope they do that. And I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable, but I had to bring that up because
no, definitely it is a reality. It is a reality, Oral, and it's nothing in speaking of it. Of course, just the way how I respond would be a bit more diplomatic in that sense. But we have drawn these challenges to the attention of country's leadership. And, we've had dialogue in terms of how this can be improved. And from a port standpoint, we are also going to do our part. And we are going to actually move the walkway from a safety standpoint, from on the roadside currently on the Wanchai Raskin Boulevard. And that walkway is actually going to go on the water side.
Oh, that's great.
So from the port on the water side, walking along where the water park and the hotel will come, turning into Chesterfields and then back into Bobby's Marina. So that is the plan. We are actually pushing to have that completed for this season. There's still some work there being done from the marina next door, so we're aligning calendars with them to assure that we can open that walkway. And again, it's really from a safety standpoint, because at times, because of container traffic passing on the Wanchai Raskin Boulevard, you have aggregates, you have commercial waste moving back and forth, also from the Point Blanche area, etc. It's quite a lot of vehicular movement right adjacent to where people are walking. And we see that as a safety concern. Also, when it rains, the dirt comes down in the road. It's very dusty. So it's not necessarily a pleasant experience for the guests. Rather than having a serene view, walking on the waterside, looking at beautiful Great Bay. So that is definitely in the making. Again, we look at it from a safety standpoint and also from an experiential standpoint as well.
It tells you something about St. Martin. With all the different little problems we have in terms of traffic and sidewalks, thousands and millions of people still want to come to this very beautiful outlet. But we can't take it for granted, because if we take it for granted, one day we're going to wake up and then we're going to find out Antigua, Guadeloupe, Martinique, those countries, they'll have it all.
Yeah, no, definitely, Oral, from that standpoint. And, speaking on the business, and this also kind of blends cruise and cargo business, and I spoke of commercial waste,
right?
And hence the reason I'm going to touch on this topic. There's been a perception for a very long time that every cruise ship comes to St. Martin, dumps garbage here, and when the cruise ships go to destinations, all of them dump garbage, and that's not the case. I just want to make that very clear, that there's clear guidelines in place from how a vessel can request to offload recyclable material and or garbage, dry garbage, so not wet waste, for the record. And that guideline was created in collaboration with the Ministry of Rami, where there's a certain amount max can be requested per ship. And if I look at 20 ships, for example, in a month, last month or the month before, out of the 20, probably one requested or two requested to do that. But we also truly understand and see the challenges that the country is facing with the current landfill and its enormous growth over the years. And we have just had a discussion with one of the cruise lines. I don't want to call their name as yet because we're still working through the details. But this season, for the first time, we're going to start a pilot project where the ship will be offloading recyclable goods in St. Martin. Plastics, glass, cardboard. And those goods will be containerized and shipped for recycling in the UK. Oh, right. And we will be the first port that they're trying this pilot project with. And if successful, and we do think it will be successful because we also operate a cargo port, obviously, this would be a platform that we would look at other brands in introducing. That's one. Two, directly within the port, we are also very much venturing into the acquisition and looking towards the acquisition, purchasing of a micro system that can handle, based on case-to-case requests from the vessels, to basically microblade their trash. So this system would be 90 kilos of garbage would be transferred into 2 kilos of what they call fluff. And the fluff is biodegradable, so then that can be thrown to the landfill, but within X amount of time, that will disintegrate into nothing. So that is also what we're looking at, because looking at it from a home porting standpoint, right, there are no destination and home port a ship without being able to service a ship. And to be able to service a ship also comes with these responsibilities. So here's where we have to make that decision and distinction as a company, but also in collaboration with a country. What do we want, right? And there's where we're working towards. Again, looking at improving our ESG platform, so looking at the environment, social, and governance of things, being a responsible entity, state-owned entity, and at the same time looking at how best do we also collaborate with local NGOs and social programs locally and giving back in that regard.
All right, so now you've covered a lot of things. I've spoken to you longer than I had planned to. Is there anything else you think we need to know about Port St. Martin that we don't know?
Well, I see potential for transformation of the business. I see more focus for quality in terms of who do we want here and how do we strategically, let's say, married those brands. And also I see potential for opportunities for young professionals looking ahead. From Port St. Martin standpoint, you will see a new brand being presented. So we are rebranding the port as well. And within short, we will be launching our new and updated website, new logo, new materials, and also look at how we share information publicly, frequently, and transparently.
All right, so I mean, it's just great having you in the program. Very quick, last question. Did they ever invite you to the schools to speak?
Yes, I've been to a few schools over the years. I've been to a few schools, a few career seminars over the years. But also very frequently, we have requests for tours at the port. So then I would also frequently engage, based on the age groups, engage with the kids there as well. So yes.
Well, that's good. At least I can see you and hear what you have to say, right?
Yes, definitely.
Well, Mr. Gumbs, I want to thank you for being here today and having this great interview with you and enlightening us on what you're doing at the port.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gibbs. It's been a pleasure for the invitation, and I look forward to our following program in due time.
All right, good. Always a pleasure having you here. Mr. Alexander Gumbs, Chief Executive Officer of Port St. Martin. I'll see you next time here on Speaking of Everything on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio. Take care. Bye.